Hi everyone. Today we have again a special guest, Professor Hans Verbeeck. Is a research professor at Ghent University and also a leader of the Q-ForestLab. His work integrates process-based ecosystem modeling, field ecology, and advanced remote sensing to understand how forests respond to climate change. He has led major international projects working in tropical and temperate forests. He has important activities in the Congo Basin, did a lot of work on the impact of lianas on tropical forests. But today we will focus on his work on the ecology and the restoration of tropical mountain forests in the Andes, Ecuador. So RecoAndes Project. His research connects fundamental ecological services with practical forest management strategies aimed at improving carbon sequestration and climate resilience. Welcome to the podcast, Professor Verbeeck.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for being here. So I'll just start immediately with the project-related questions, perhaps. Can you explain about your work on Andean mountain forests?
Yeah, we have several activities for the moment in the tropical Andes of Ecuador. In this area, there are forests, tropical forests in the mountains. They look a bit different than the tropical rainforests, which are the lowland tropical rainforests, because the mountain forests, the trees are a bit smaller, they are less tall, and some of these forests depend a lot on the clouds for getting water. So some of these forests are constantly in the clouds, and they receive water from those clouds. So therefore they are often called cloud forests. In this area, there is, however, a lot of deforestation because there is a high human population in the Andes in countries like Ecuador and Peru. And there has been a lot of deforestation, especially in the past few decades, let's say the last 50 years. A lot of forests have disappeared, and we are working on both on the natural forest in this area, but also a lot on forest restoration, because a lot of efforts are going on to restore these forests in these landscapes.
How did you start the work in Ecuador?
Yeah, the work in Ecuador started more than 10 years ago. I think it was in 2012, when a Belgian NGO contacted us, the NGO Bos Plus, because they were executing a large reforestation project in the Andes Mountains, 500 hectares of land. And they were looking for scientists to measure those forests, to check the carbon storage in these forests. But the problem was that they did not have a lot of budget. So in the first years, we have been sending our master students, because they are cheap, to the area to measure those forests, which was mainly setting up a plot network in those reforested areas, and in those plots measure all the trees, which were very small trees at that time because they were just planted 2 years before. Today, some of these forests have really tall trees of 20 meters high already. But during the years, let's say in the past 10 years, we have started to do actual funded science projects, mainly funded by VLIR, the Flemish Inter-University Development Cooperation Program, VLIR-UOS. And we had several VLIR projects there with multiple universities.
So, who are your current partners in Ecuador?
Yeah, so currently we are mainly working with EPN, which is a technical engineering school in Quito, the biology department there, with a professor called Selena Baez. And the second partner is Jimena Palomeque. She's a professor at the University of Cuenca in the south of Ecuador. And Dalma, the PhD student that you will also interview, is based at that university in Cuenca. These are our main partners, academic partners, but we are also working with local NGOs and governmental organizations that are active in forest restoration in the country.
Why specifically this region, or why this is an important ecosystem to go?
Yeah, the mountain forests are very diverse. This means that if you go up the mountains and you start from, let's say, around sea level, and you will find forest from the foothills up to 3,000 meters high, and at every altitude you have a whole different ecosystem with different species, different tree species. So there's a huge diversity, not only in terms of tree species, but also, for example, some of these areas are very well known for their very high bird diversity. So it's a global biodiversity hotspot. And additionally, these forests are delivering a lot of ecosystem services to the local population in the area. One example is water provisioning, for example. So a very important ecosystem, but very much threatened by deforestation, mainly deforestation for extensive cattle grazing. Hi Dalma.
Hi, thanks.
Hello, welcome in my office. This is Dalma. She's a first year PhD student from Ecuador, and she's one of the 3 PhD students we currently have from Ecuador working on tropical forest in the Andes Mountains.
Okay, it's okay. Thank you.
Can you say 1, 2, 3 to check the microphone?
1, 2, 3.
Okay, ready?
Okay.
Can you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Hi everyone, my name is Dalma Orellana. I am from Ecuador, and I am doing a PhD between Ghent University and Universidad de Cuenca in my country.
Can you tell us more about your current PhD research?
My PhD focuses on understanding how the Andean forests are so vulnerable to climate change mainly, and also to land use change. That's why we are working now in abandoned cattle pastures. These are located in an elevational gradient to 2,000 meters to 3,000 meters above sea level. So we have planted around 2,600 seedlings of 5 different native woody species. So the idea is to get some knowledge about how these species are adapting in this kind of stressful conditions and this kind of ecosystems, and to restore this again in tropical forest. So that's why we have established different kind of sensors to monitor different variables, for example, soil conditions like temperature and also humidity and sunlight.
What interested you to choose this PhD research?
I am very interested in do this kind of research because I have worked in this topic in the past. When I did my master, I was also working in restoration ecology, and it's also very important to me as somebody from Andes to restore this kind of ecosystems and to know how to restore these lands in native forests again.
If you are to rewatch this episode again after 5 years, what would be your message to your future self?
Yeah, I think I will be very proud of myself, and I also hope to find this kind of solutions to do a better to find this kind of solutions to do a better world, I think.
Okay, no worries. I just spontaneously.
Okay. So I would like to say something like carry on doing that you are doing now. So I think the product of your PhD research will be very useful for future studies and also for ecological restoration.
What are the impacts of the research on local communities, policies?
Yeah, so the interesting thing about the research we are doing there is that on the long term, this will lead to better understanding of the natural forests and how to conserve them. And on the other hand, a better understanding of how to implement successful forest restoration strategies. For example, or one obvious example is the species choice and which species to plant to get a successful restoration is very much depending on the environmental conditions, the altitude in the mountains, the local climate variables, and in our research we are trying to identify the success factors for successful restoration, and these ideas and this knowledge we are trying to communicate them as good as possible to the NGOs and governmental organizations that are doing this active reforestation. In addition, there is also what we call passive reforestation, is that you just simply put a fence around the grasslands, the old grassland, that you don't let the cows in anymore, and that you let the forest spontaneously regrow. And in many cases, this is also very successful and much more cheap than actively planting trees. So that is also an important outcome for the practitioners.
Actually, this was very interesting to also know that to see your research prepared for this podcast. Very amazing work that also inspires people, young people like us, to see that something is being done to preserve the ecosystem and our wildlife nature. In that sense, I also want to ask you, what are the most important threats of the tropical mountain forests in Ecuador, and how are they? How are you studying them?
Yeah, so the most important threats are, on one hand, the deforestation, which is increasing, and there's also an important historical backlog of deforestation. So a lot of the forest has disappeared already, which has changed the microclimate, the local microclimate. So, for example, some of those regions which used to be forested have now become too dry, which makes it impossible to replant a forest there. And then, in addition to this human pressure on the forest, there is also the overall pressure of climate change. So climate becomes warmer, and the climate niches are actually moving uphill. So the temperatures are rising, and a mountain forest can respond to that by moving species upwards. So a certain tree species that was used to grow at the climate of 1,000-meter altitude, that climate we find today 200 meters higher. And the problem is that those species cannot proliferate and move as fast as the climate is changing, and this is a very important threat to the remaining forest as well.
I think also one interesting question to ask is about the methodologies, because usually you work in the lab or maybe in a farmland based on my experience, but it would be interesting also to know what methodologies you use to work in the mountain forest in Ecuador.
Yes, well, the main methodology we use is what we call an observational plot network. This means that we establish permanent plots in the forests, which we mark, and we go back there every few years and remeasure the trees. These are very basic measurements, measuring the diameter and the height of trees to calculate their biomass and their volume. And if you do that over time, you can understand the growth, the carbon accumulation in the trees. And we have such networks along these altitudinal gradients. So from the foothill forest to the highest forest at more than 3,000 meters altitude. And this is a very interesting setup to study forests in a plot network along these altitudinal gradients, which are also climate gradient because it also gets colder when you go higher up in the mountains. So these altitudinal transects can also serve as a kind of surrogate for a climate change experiment. We have such networks in natural forests, but also in planted forests across the country in Ecuador. And in addition to this observational network, our second approach is to do experiments. And in the region of Cuenca, near the University of Cuenca, we have set up a few years ago a large field experiment. At 3 altitudes in the mountains, we have planted 5 different tree species in different combinations and also with different management. So in some of those plots we remove the grasses, which makes it easier for the trees to grow, and in some of those plots we use shading in the first years of the tree growth, and then we also have control plots, and there we can really, under controlled conditions, at the different altitudes, see how the growth of each of those tree species, local tree species, is going, and that will lead hopefully to good recommendations of species choice to the practitioners. And in addition to that, we also do all kinds of what we call ecophysiological measurements on those trees. We measure, for example, photosynthesis, or we sample their leaves and measure carbon-13 isotopes in the leaves to study the water use efficiency of the trees. So it's a combination of methodologies that we use.
How does your project contribute to capacity building?
Yeah, capacity building is a very important aspect, and it's also one of the motivations why we are working in Ecuador, which is training local students, and we work with local master students, but since a few years also with local PhD students that do a joint PhD between their local Ecuadorian university and Ghent University. And the first of those PhD students is now in the final year and will soon submit his PhD. And Dalma is actually the third PhD student we have in a row working. They're all working on different aspects of those observational and experimental setup that I just explained. This is a very interesting collaboration because the local scientists and also the local professors have a lot of knowledge on the local species, the local ecology of the forest, which we don't have. So we also learn a lot from them. And they also learn from us, for example, new methodologies to study the forest. So it's a really give and take collaboration where we learn from each other.
It became a tradition of this podcast, actually. You mind if I ask some general questions?
No problem.
Which planets do you choose, and what would be your main message today?
Which planet I choose? That's a good question. A planet where we can hopefully keep climate change to a livable level. It's clear also in the latest IPCC reports that we will have the coming decades will be difficult, and although we know what the solutions are for the climate change problem, I'm pretty sure that human society is just not able to implement all those solutions fast enough to keep climate warming below 1.5 degrees. So I'm afraid we will have to adapt to some climate change. So I hope we can keep the climate warming as low as possible, and that we will we will be able to somehow adapt to it. But I'm afraid that the coming 20, 30 years will be quite difficult, that there will be quite some impacts of climate change, especially for agriculture, for example.
What skills you believe are essential for PhD students to have on the world?
Yeah, doing a PhD is a long journey of at least 4 years. I think endurance is an important quality. So having the courage to continue, even if some parts of your PhD are failing, I think that's part of a PhD trajectory. But you need some courage to keep continuing and to learn from your failures. And I think also communicating about your work is very important in all kinds of communication ways that you can imagine. It's from just talking to, or having the courage to talk to different colleagues or as experts about your work, but also presenting your work, presenting it to a wider audience. I think this is a very important skill that you can learn during the PhD, but you also need to take the chance to learn it and try to find opportunities to train your communication skills.
Any advice for PhDs?
For incoming PhDs? I think I would say take your time to take a slow start. I would say take your time to develop your research plan step by step, and don't worry if in the first year things are not going as expected. That's a normal part of a PhD trajectory.
Thank you very much for being here today. It means a lot to me as a student who's very inspired on the advances being made on resolving our planet and also restoring the wildlife. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.